It's like, what? I mean, I don't know if do y'all know this, Bill?
We've heard of it as well, and it is impossible to get. I've been trying. I mean, how delightful does that movie sound? And if you watch the trailer, it really looks like a hoot.
I know, it's got chainsaw in the title, Gunnar Hansen's in it, but no.
Also, who buys their friend a monkey? That's a commitment for a gift.
It's so weird. It's so bizarre. Yeah.
All right, kids, it is back to school time. I hope you've got your Trapper Keepers and all your Sharpies and your school supplies because it's time. We've got a return guest. We thought this would be the perfect time, back to school time, to invite her back. So we're excited. Got a great topic. We'll get to that in a minute. Welcome to the Fright Club podcast. She is Hope Madden.
He's George Wolf.
And we are from madwolf.com. And before we get to this week, how about last week? We were at Gateway Film Center, where we love to be, in front of that great crowd. And we talked about angels in horror. We played a great movie that most of the crowd had not seen, which we love. And most of the crowd, I think all the crowd, loved, called A Dark Song. And we got some feedback.
Yes, Seth, who always does such a great job of coming up with something that we could have considered. And this one, he thought of The Devil's Advocate, which I think is because, of course, Pacino plays Lucifer, who counts.
And it's a real dialed-down performance. No, I'm kidding, of course.
And then Brandon was just happy to be reminded about the Henry Rollins He Never Died film because he'd kind of forgotten about it. He was happy to revisit it. And that is such a fun movie.
Do not forget Henry Rollins. He'll come to your house. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And it was great to see the reaction of the movie, A Dark Song, because it's another one. I know you love it, especially when people have not only not seen it, but not really heard of it. This one really slipped through the cracks.
Yeah, it did. And we had some great response from the audience. We had some people come down who kind of explained to us the ritual that they undertake and the details that they got right and got wrong. It was just fascinating to hear people tell us about the movie.
Yeah, they knew a lot about that ritual. They scared me. No, that was awesome. So thank you as always. We'll be back at Gateway in September. Yeah, I had to stop and think what month this was. But in September, and then we know we're back in October. We're going to show Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. We talked about that for a special Halloween bonus. So all that's fun, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. As I said, it is back to school time, and we welcome back a guest we had, it's been a few weeks now. So when we talked about our favorite library moments in horror, we promised we'd have her back because she's a great guest, and she's back now. Welcome Jennifer Snook Brown from real-librarians.com.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be back. Yeah, it's been a few months. I think maybe February, early March.
Well, it's so hard to keep track of time anymore.
Time is a construct.
No, that's true. That is true. But yeah, we've been, we talked about it at the first screening because it's such a rich topic. It's surprisingly deep. The amount of library scenes and awesomely bad librarian characters in horror films.
Yeah, and just a reminder that I stumbled across your site from doing research on one of our podcasts months ago, and it's a great site, and it's so thorough. You have so much knowledge in there, and it's clear you put a lot of work into it, a lot of passion as well. Again, I highly recommend you checking it out. It's real-librarians.com.
REEL.
Right. And what's the slogan? It's movies plus librarians is real love. Is that what it is?
Yeah, librarians plus movies equals real love, REEL.
Yes.
Yeah, it's only a pun that makes sense in print, but I chuckle every time.
Well, it's great. It's great. And we're glad to have you back. And like I said, last time we talked about library moments, but this time we're getting personal with this. It's our favorite, your favorite, and Jennifer's favorite librarians.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that it's fun to do this is because Jennifer knows so much more about this than we do, which is really super exciting for us to dig in with somebody who knows vastly more about a horror movie topic than we do. And another reason that we like to do this is because two of our favorite people and podcast listeners are librarians, Brandon and Katie, and librarians are superheroes. So we're always excited to get a chance to talk to and salute them.
Yeah, and I'm sure you saw, as a lot of people did, the tweet shout out from AOC a few weeks ago about love for the librarians. Well deserved.
Yes, indeed.
Oh yes, we love our librarians. So we're going to get into this. We each have a top 5 list, and there's some crossover, which is great. So we'll go back and forth, just 5 to 5, all the way up to number 1. These are great librarians in horror. So who is starting?
Well, actually, just for 1 second before we start for real. So there are a couple movies on this list, one in particular we'd never seen, and we saw because Jennifer recommended it. And she saw a movie after our last one because we recommended it, which is Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. And she just told us a tidbit about that movie that blew our minds. Would you share it?
Definitely. I really, really enjoyed the movie. Great recommendation. My husband and I watched it together, and we were just twirling like all the way through and like recognizing all the little tropes, of horror films. So y'all were right on the money about that one. And during the library scene, which is short but very memorable, and I revisited my notes about it. And when we were watching the film, I recognized the carpet in the library scene. I went, wait a minute, isn't that the Portland, Maine Central Branch, or the Multnomah County Library Maine Branch? And I looked it up afterwards, and yes, indeed, that scene was filmed in the Portland.
That's so awesome. You're watching a movie and you pick out the carpet. We knew that you were good people. We knew it.
And to be fair, I know that library because I used to live and work in Portland, so that's why I remember that. But Portland is known for its quirky carpet.
More information we didn't
These
have.
are the facts that librarians know. This is awesome. This is awesome. Well, glad you liked that movie. We really would have been surprised if you didn't, because that one is a lot of fun. Do we have any under the radar that didn't make the list you want to give honorable mention to?
Actually, I think Jennifer has mainly the under the radar films.
Yeah, because it took me a long time. Y'all gave me plenty of notice, which I appreciated. It took me a long time to think about it, and some readers emailed me with some thoughts too. But there's some classics in here that I didn't choose for the final list, but like the 1973 classic, The Wicker Man.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Ingrid Pitt plays, she's only seen in the film as in the registrar's office, but she plays both the registrar and the librarian in that really creepy town. So that's one I want to mention. There's so many. I mean, we're doing 10 with some overlap, but there's so many more. And like the 1944 kind of minor classic Weird Woman, Evelyn Ankers plays a very revengeful librarian. Evelyn Ankers also starred in The Wolfman horror classic, monster classic, Horror of Dracula, the character, the Hammer classic. Yeah. Oh, God, it's such a good movie. And Jonathan Harker, they changed the character of Jonathan Harker to where he pretends to be a librarian who's there to catalog Dracula's books. That was on my short list. And I haven't seen this film, but I want to see it because I couldn't find a copy of it, but I'm intrigued by the 2010, I think it's an indie horror film called All About Evil, and Natasha Lyonne stars as a librarian who inherits a movie house, and she then, from what I've read about the description, because I haven't been able to track it down, she then starts making snuff films. So it's like, what? I mean, I don't know if do y'all know this film?
So we've heard of it as well, and it is impossible to get. I've been trying. I mean, how delightful does that movie sound? And if you watch the trailer, it really looks like a hoot. It looks like so much fun. And yeah, I've been trying for years to track down. So if anybody listening has a copy of All About Evil, please let us know because we're dying to watch it.
Yeah, a librarian who makes snuff films. I mean, that's all you need to know.
It's ripped from your own life.
Yeah, that's right. I think my colleagues are going to be listening to this, so no.
Okay, no. That's writer's embellishment. That's what that is. Okay, so we've got the honorable mentions, we've got the list, we've got librarians in horror. So now for real, who's starting?
I think Jennifer is.
Okay, the guest gets to go first. What do you got for number 5?
Okay, number 5. This one's kind of an odd one, but just stay with me. We're going to go on a little adventure. So Louise the librarian, it's 2 films, but it's the same character, which is, I haven't come across this really before. And the same screenwriters wrote both films, but it's the 1973 film, The Killing Kind.
You didn't do it, did you?
I didn't do what?
You know what I'm talking about.
And the 1980 film, The Attic.
He disappeared the day we were to be married. He left you on your wedding day? I didn't say that.
And Luana Anders plays Louise in The Killing Kind. And the screenwriters who wrote both, I'm not great with pronunciation, but Tony Krachalis and George Edwards. So it's my theory that they wrote The Killing Kind, and the librarian is a supporting character. She's nasty. Just like a literal peeping Tom. And she talks about these fantasies of which she is going to kill her father, poison her father, and then burning all the books. And she has other fantasies, but she only talks about the fantasies. So she's like a wannabe killer, a librarian. And then it's almost like the screenwriters. Oh, and she has a father who's in a wheelchair because she fantasized about killing him. And then it's almost like the screenwriters wanted to go more into depth in the librarian character. And that's the main role of the attic. And Carrie Snodgrass plays Louise in that film. And it's like they transplant Louise and her father, but give her a different character. Like it's much more kind of a drama role. And she's not so much nasty as she is kind of just sad and pathetic. And instead of just talking about these fantasies of burning the books and like killing her father by like grinding glass in his food, then they actually show it on screen where it's like the hallucinations, and it goes much more in depth. There's a lot of characters in the attic, and we actually get to see a retirement ceremony for the librarian, which I don't think I've seen. No, there's another movie I've seen that in, but only a horror film thing. So yeah, it's just a really weird story, and I didn't know the connection. I can't remember which film I saw first, but then I watched the second one and I went, wait a minute, that sounds like that other film, and then realized it was the same writers. And that I wrote a blog post comparing the two films and that character of Louise and how it changes, and that is still the #1 viewed post on my site after 10 years, which
it's fascinating. But I think obviously I would think because it's the same screenwriters, it has to be the same character. And it reminds me of like when you get, say, a box set of a longtime musician and you start listening to all these other unreleased songs that are bits and pieces of other songs that did make it out because they're creative people and they reuse ideas. And this was, Hope was telling me about this earlier, and it was fascinating.
Yeah, I vaguely remember The Killing Kind. I watched it on TV when I was a kid, and I went back and rewatched it because I didn't remember a librarian. I remember that character, but I didn't remember her as a librarian. And I had never even heard of The Attic. So we watched that one with Ray Milland, who plays the dad, who's a much meaner person. Louise's dad in the other film is almost borderline likable. And it is just amazing to watch both of those movies back to back and wonder if the director just took things in a completely different way, or then you think, well, how much say does the actor have that they decided that she was going to be so much more sort of crushed by life in the second film, although she's the hero, she's the main character, so she has to be more likable. The Louise from the first movie, she can't really carry a movie because you just hate her. She's awful. So it was a fascinating way that they just changed the character and gave her own story.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's really rare. I would call her more of an anti-hero because I mean she's pretty awful too in the attic where she's drinking at work. It's hinted that she actually did create a fire in the library, and that's why she's being like shuffled off into early retirement. And I remember I went back to my post about this, and my husband, after watching it, he said, if you only watch this film, you would think that being a librarian must suck. Because she says things like, I wish I'd had the good sense to try some other job when I was young. I might not have been a librarian. So, I mean, it's not an uplifting film. I mean, she does face her own fears, and you think about the title of it being The Attic, and all through the film, you're wondering, why is this called The Attic, right? And like the last 5 minutes explain that. Yeah, it's like not great marketing.
Also, who buys their friend a monkey? That's a commitment for a gift.
It's so weird. It's so bizarre. Yeah. But it's, like you said, like watching them back to back is really interesting.
That is a great way to start. Two for the price of one there. The character of Louise from 1973, The Killing Kind, and from 1980, The Attic. Very cool. So we'll go to our number 5, and this is from 1993. And the character actually is H.P. Lovecraft, played by Jeffrey Combs in Necronomicon, Book of the Dead.
Jeffrey Combs stars in the wraparound story of an anthology of different Lovecraftian tales, and he has visited a library in Arkham, no doubt, because he wants to find the Necronomicon and eventually steal the Necronomicon. So the librarians, there are several librarians, and they are not exactly what they look like on the surface, which makes good sense given the content of the film. And Jeffrey Combs also doesn't really what he looks like on the surface, because for whatever reason they made him up to look like Bruce Campbell. He looks like a sort of anemic, weird Bruce Campbell for no reason I can think of, because I don't think that that's what Lovecraft looked like. But it's one of those movies where the wraparound story is your favorite one, which happens too often, I think. And part of that, I think, is because Brian Yuzza directed the wraparound itself. But I always love Jeffrey Combs in everything, and I love the vibe, the energy that he brings to this, the weirdness that he brings to this story, because Lovecraft stories need that.
It is really weird about the makeup, though. Yeah. I mean, right down to a scar on his chin, just like Bruce Campbell. That is, it's a little weird. What'd you think, Jennifer?
Yeah, this one's a weird one. It's not a good movie because I think it's an experimental movie. It's got the different directors for each segment, but it is fun if you're familiar with Lovecraft and like those little elements that come in. And yeah, the reveal of the librarians is worth it, I would say. I was freaking out watching this, and I like that they put Lovecraft as a character, like that was really interesting to me. And I love this quote. I mean, it's like the librarians are like being purposely obtuse, because like Lovecraft like steals the keys and they're monks, it's a monastery library and they're monk librarians, and he like steals the keys while the librarian is on the library ladder. I'm like, yeah, okay, suspension of disbelief. But when the librarian, he's warned off, don't go in the back room, and in the librarians, when they discover him, I love it when they say, consider your privileges revoked, Mr. Lovecraft.
That is awesome. And this also has David Warner, great longtime character actors in this.
That's right. And the reason to point that out is because he plays Dr. Madden.
No relation. This movie did not get a domestic release in the U.S. It was released in Japan and France, but then when New Line got it, they just put it straight to home video. And that is our number 5 from 93, Lovecraft, played by Jeffrey Combs, in the wraparound of Necronomicon Book of the Dead. So that takes us up to number 4, and Jennifer, we're going to just slide right on past yours because we will get to it later. That's one of the ones that overlaps on our list here. So we'll move it up to our number 4, correct? Yes. And this is from 1960, a classic here. It is Edgar, played by Lawrence Payne in The Telltale Heart.
You know, don't you? You know! You can hear it, can't you? You can hear it!
Hear what?
The beating of his heart! The beating of his infernal heart!
This is a Poe adaptation that, surprisingly enough, turns into sort of a thwarted romance, which the original is very definitely not. And there's no librarian in the original either, and there is in this one. His name is Edgar, which is funny, too, to have it sort of be kind of about the character, about the writer himself.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, at the beginning, the landlady calls him Mr. Poe 3 times.
That's not his name through the rest of the movie. His name, he's not Poe. That is a funny slip-up if they didn't do it on purpose. But Lawrence Payne plays, and he's the one, he's like, if you've read the story, he's the narrative point of view. He's the one that, kills someone, so it's a different character in the movie that he kills, and he just keeps hearing his heartbeat, and it drives him mad. And in this one, it's because his friend, who's just a much more interesting human being, has stolen away his girl, his one and only girl. And one of the things that I like about this movie is Lawrence Payne's performance. He's so earnest, and at the same time, he's just a bad dude. And you don't, one of the very first things he does, he finally works up the courage to ask this woman out who lives across the street from him, and they go out and they have a nice time, and he convinces her to let him walk her up to her room because it's dark in that hallway, and she does let him, and then he molests her, and she has to beat him off, and then he comes back the next day, forgive me, and I thought, why? No. And it's just so funny because, in that way, you buy in the end that as peachy of a guy as it seems, in the end, no, he's definitely going to do the wrong thing because he just doesn't really have any scruples.
Yeah, he's awful. You said the slip up about, Mr. Poe, and they also misspell Edgar Allan Poe's name in the credits. So, yeah, it's an odd one. But I'm totally with you with Lawrence Payne. Like, I just feel like he deliciously overacts, and like his facial expressions are just like the most ever. And it's him that he's the draw to the story. And I feel like he's like the ultimate like white male fragility. This is what happens. It's a cautionary tale, I would say they turn it into. But it's devastating, this scene where he reveals to the girl, she asks him what he does, and he says, "I work as a librarian. I'm in charge of the reference section in the main library." And her response is that all? And oh my God, I felt that in my soul. Like that burn. And I think about, why a librarian? Like you said, it's not in the original film. Why in the world would they put it, change his character to be a librarian? And they do a hint later, because she tries to tell people about him, like her suspicion, like she tries to tell the police about her suspicions. And the police are like, no, he's a librarian. He's a respectable citizen. It can't be him. So I think, again, it's this juxtaposition, which I mentioned in our first podcast together. Like, you wouldn't expect, the nice, trusting, librarian. Like, it lends itself to horror because it's so unexpected. And it's just a great twist, I guess.
Well, aside from the throwing shade at librarians and the misspelling of the name, what did you think of the rugs in this movie?
It's black and white.
Darn it. That is, it's actually, The Telltale Heart is one of my favorite Poe stories. I love it, but it's varies wildly from the Poe story. So if you're coming to this for a traditional telling, you're not going to get it. But this is our number 4, The Telltale Heart, the 1960 version. All right, so that takes us up to number 3. It's back in your court, Jennifer.
Yes, my number 3 pick is the character of Mike Hanlon. In it, there's the 1990 TV miniseries, but I'm really going to be focusing on It Chapter 2, the 2019 film, where Isaiah Mustafa plays the character Mike Hanlon. Tim Reed did a good job in the TV miniseries, but I really want to focus on the more recent one.
Memory's the thing. It's the key. It's the key to everything.
If it really does want us back here, don't you think the smartest thing we can do is just get the hell out of Derry?
No. It does want us back. Of course it does. But it doesn't know I know what I know.
What do you know?
How to kill the shit out of it.
Because in our first podcast, we mentioned the 1990 miniseries, with the scene in the library with the balloon bursting. Oh, my God, I still think about that. Ugh.
Yeah.
So chilling. And then the It Chapter 1 movie, 2017, I think, the scary scene in the library with the judgy bitch librarian. And I mentioned then, I really like the character of Mike Hanlon because, in my opinion, he's the real town hero of the story. And I feel like Isaiah Mustafa, really grounds the film. He's the man with the plan. And when I was watching it, afterwards thinking about it, I realized, he really drives the story in every sense, the beginning, the middle, and the end. Because in the beginning, Isaiah Mustafa, he even narrates the film. So the first word that he says in the over narration is memory. And he reunites the Losers Club, helps bring back their memories because the other white members, because he's the only black member of the club, the other white members, he helps bring back their memories of the town because they've all forgotten. And in the middle, he drives it by revealing his plan, and he gets them the goal, each of them has to find a token from their past and then reunites at the library. And at the end, he figures out how to kill it and reunites them to actually, and he's involved in the end. I haven't read the book, but I've heard that he's not in the final fight scene in the book, but he is in this film, which I think it was a good choice. And I really like this film because I think it does a better job of referencing the long-lasting effects of racism. Like, he's the only Black character, and that's really significant. And he's the only one who stays behind.
Right.
And I think that's, it's reflective of all the white characters left, like white flight, right?
Mm-hmm.
They all left. He stays behind. He's the institutional memory. He has to bear that burden. And when he's trying to convince Billy, James McAvoy is kind of the leader, kind of seen as the leader of the group. He knows that he needs to convince Billy so that the others believe him. And that's really poignant because a Black man, has to convince a white man so the other white characters will believe him.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really poignant there. So I think that they actually did a good job of that. And I think, maybe I'm stretching here, but I feel like they're pointing at America's original sin of racism. It's not Pennywise. Maybe they kill Pennywise, spoiler, if y'all haven't seen it. But, racism really is the original sin and monster that we have to keep fighting. So I don't know, maybe I got too deep there, but I find it a really fascinating story.
No, I think that's a very good reading, because you're right. He stays behind, and he's done all the research. He has all the knowledge that connects everything together and lets the plan go in motion. I think viewing him as a hero and bringing him, like you said, into the extra scenes in the most recent movie was a very good idea, like you said.
And also, I love that, in so many films, so many horror films, the library, as we talked about in the last time, serves as really this very important place where people get the information that they need to move forward. I love that it's a librarian, right? It's not just some random character that goes to the library to find this out. It's like, he is it. I'm that font of knowledge that you need. Let's move forward. And I think that probably should happen more often, because he really does make for a fascinating character.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. Like, he is the library within himself. Yeah.
That is a great one. For number 3 for Jennifer is Mike Hanlon from It, both the miniseries and the It Chapter 2, the big screen version. So moving up to our number 3, this is from 1989 from a movie called The Church, and the librarian is Evan, played by Tomas Arana.
Shh. Last night, the angel of evil possessed me, and I became his servant. I want to do evil, to kill.
This movie was co-written by Dario Argento, who produced it as well. But it's directed by Michael Soavi. And I think that if you're an Argento fan, this one kind of leans more toward Lucio Fulci. It's that type of Italian nonsensical, like surreal, a lot of nudity, nothing makes very much sense, face melting, eye gouging kind of a horror film. Now, those are not my favorite, but I have always had a soft spot for this movie, and I have no idea why that is, because, as you know, I can be very nitpicky about Catholicism and horror, and God, they get it so wildly wrong here. It's unbelievable. But that's okay, because nothing makes sense in this movie at all. Evan shows up at this church to be their new librarian, and he's just a dick from the beginning, and you can't understand why the lovely woman who is restoring the fresco is in any way interested in him, but immediately they have sex. And then he goes about basically destroying big parts of the church and really not being a good librarian at all. And what happens when both of those things go wrong? You unleash demons, and essentially the world comes to an end. The movie reminds me actually a lot of the film Demons, and I love a lot of the kills in it.
Well, I was just going to say, I think I know why you liked it, because originally it was conceived as an entry in that series to be like the third Demons film. But apparently Soave said that he thought those movies were, quote, pizza schlock, unquote, and insisted they were standing alone. So your love for it has a very common thread there.
The movie is a lot more aesthetically interesting, partly because it is set in this just gorgeous big church. It does have a lot of really interesting visual ideas. I mean, the beginning and end, the very beginning, the church is built over a mass grave where inquisitors killed an entire village of people, and then they built this church on top of it. So the whole time you're thinking that that's the evil. No, that was fine. That was A-okay. The evil was... So right from the beginning, I'm like, well, really? But that's okay. There's so much... I mean, the sexism that is inherent in Italian horror is big and loud, and it is in this film as well. But it looks great, and it's just a lot of fun to watch. What did you think of it?
I was laughing all through that because that was such a good description. I think the word nonsensical is super charitable. It's an awful film, but it's kind of awesomely bad.
Yeah.
In a way, if you just go with it, it really leans into its genre, I would say. And yeah, the Evan, the librarian character, is not a role model. I mean, total sleazeball. He just looks super sketchy. And I was going through it, and I'm like, what do I remember about this character? And the words, lazy, greedy. And like, even while he's having sex, he like has to stop and like, oh wait, pause here while I look up this thing. And I'm like, oh my God, you're so awful. And yeah, and he even says, he's introducing himself to the character played by Asia Argento.
Lottie.
She plays a character, and I think it was one of her first roles, if not,
I think
really
so,
early.
Yeah, she was very young.
Yeah, very young. And he introduces himself by saying, I'm the new librarian. I have to catalog all these books. Unfortunately. Again, just wounded my soul here. But I think it is interesting that he's a cataloger. I mean, he's a librarian who's going to be cataloging these books. And he also says later, like, I don't want to spend the rest of my life looking at old books. And I'm like, don't. We don't. So yeah, like when he like unleashes, because he's greedy and stupid, really, the demon and gets possessed. I didn't feel bad about that.
No.
Number 3, Evan from The Church, 1989.
Good choice.
Yes, good choice. So that takes up to number 2, and this is a happy accident. This is one that we both agree on. You guys both agree. This is at number 2, so we'll let you spill it, Jennifer.
Okay, so yes, this is Evelyn Evie Carnahan in the 1990 film The Mummy.
What are you doing here?
Oh, look, I may not be an explorer or an adventurer or a treasure seeker or a gunfighter, Mr. O'Connell, but I am proud of what I am.
And what is that?
I am a librarian.
Fantastic film. I love this movie. It is just a joy to watch and rewatch, I would say. Like, again, it really leans into its genre, and it's more, of a horror action film, but it has those roots to the classic, monster movie horror, the 1932 film, The Mummy. And Rachel Weisz plays Evie. And she joins forces with an American soldier, Brendan Fraser. They have so much chemistry. It's like off the charts. And her brother, to stop Imhotep, who's been, resurrected. The spirit has been resurrected. And it's just a really joyful film. And I love this film because we get a really great early scene in the library.
So good.
Where the library ladder, and she's, trying to go shelve books and take a shortcut. Don't take shortcuts. That's the overall. And she just the fantastic domino. I think it took one take to do that because they set it up so well. And she stands up for herself, even to the museum director, and she describes, all of her qualifications, and she stands up for herself later on too. Like, in my opinion, she's the true hero of the story.
Yeah, and this has a very swashbuckling Indiana Jones sort of monster movie vibe to it, and it also has Imhotep, the actor Arnold Vosloo. That's a guy, one of those guys who looks fantastic bald because he has a perfectly shaped head.
Yes.
Well, I feel like the couple of the things that have always stood out for me in this movie, and it's really, for me, the beginning to end, it's Rachel Weisz. She's amazing in this movie. She is absolutely unfairly beautiful in this movie. It is criminal how attractive she is in this film. And then also, I have to think that this might be your favorite "I'm a librarian" scene of all time, because she gets very drunk. And Brendan Fraser is like, so I get your brother, I get these other people, I don't get you. And her thing is just like, I love me, I'm a librarian.
Yes, I am proud of what I am. I am a librarian. It's so meme worthy. It's like classic librarian.
And of course, this movie was a massive success. In fact, the director, Stephen Sommers, says he got a phone call the morning after it was released, and they just said, we need another one, which is good. The sad part is they got progressively worse.
Oh, they definitely did. But it's everything from 1999, for some reason, seems to be having such a resurgence right now. And this one is massively popular again. And also, I think because Brendan Fraser has just had a couple of very big castings after not really working for 10 years, and people apparently just love him.
Yes, I agree. I'm pro team Brendan Fraser and pro Evie Carnahan.
Yeah, definitely. We both are. So that is number 2 for both of us on our list of favorite librarians in horror. All right, so before we get to our number 1, which is your number 4 that we switched, I'm going to give myself a headache with all this math. Let's go with what you came up with at number 1.
Well, if you listen to the first podcast, I think, I gave the game away by sharing my love for Chainsaw Sally, the ultimate indie horror film from 2004, and its title role for the librarian. Chainsaw Sally is the librarian, played by April Monique Burrell. I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name, but her husband directed the film as well. So it was a web series, and then it was this 2004 film, and it's kind of hard to track down. I have a DVD copy of it.
I don't believe you're gonna cut me with that saw.
It's kind of like the All About Evil, where you just sum it up in one sentence and you just want to watch it. It's a librarian by day, a chainsaw-wielding serial killer by night.
Love it.
I mean, that's all you need.
Yeah,
so fantastic.
If that's your librarian, I am not returning books late. I'll tell you that right now.
That's right.
This is one we'd never even heard of before you were on the last time, and have watched it since then at your recommendation. And it is funny because one of the great things about her murder spree is that those are mainly the people that upset her, are people who are loud in the library,
right,
who have overdue books. I think that's really funny. There's also, though, when you watch it, they've got in the credits, Herschel Gordon Lewis is in the movie, Gunnar Hansen, who was the original Leatherface. And Herschel Gordon Lewis does have lines. He plays the clerk at the hardware store, so he actually has a speaking role. And Gunnar Hansen, there's a flashback that's in black and white, and so in the flashback in black and white, someone opens a door, and Gunnar Hansen is standing inside the door, and that's it. That's every moment that he is on the screen, and it's really funny to me that he gets third billing.
I know, it's got chainsaw in the title. Gunnar Hansen's in it, but no.
It's so low budget, and that's why I just have a soft spot for it, because it really, again, I like films that lean into what they are, and this one is unabashedly, unapologetically low budget. And I love that she and her brother, they reenact scenes from classic horror films, but then her brother keeps getting them mixed up, which is hilarious to me. And I love the little bit where they introduce her, visually introduce her character. She's in the library. She's a public librarian, and she's reading the big book of serial killers. It's are you reading tips? Are you researching, what you're doing? I just love those little bits in there. I didn't actually need the backstory to explain why she's a serial killer. Even explaining her hairdo, why she has that hairdo. We're not going to do spoilers, but I didn't need that. All I needed to know was that she was a chainsaw wielding librarian.
Right.
I feel that sells the movie.
Yeah, we talk about that in all sorts of horror movies, that you don't need that. So often you don't, and especially with sequels, they get carried away in giving us the backstory that we don't want and most of the time don't need.
Yeah, actually, I think maybe my favorite thing about this movie is the rapport that she has with her brother. I think her brother is my favorite character. And it seems to me that those two actors had to have been friends, but because it feels very lived in, their relationship, and very, very fun.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really interesting observation, and I like their dynamic too. And speaking of like sequels, I mean, I know this was part of a web series, but I hadn't quite realized that she also continued to play the same character in a 2012 film called Little Big Boy. So she's still like Chainsaw Sally in this. And apparently it's a mockumentary like about the horror film industry.
Wow.
So I feel like I need to check that out.
Yes, clearly.
We all do. That is nice. So that is Jennifer's number one, Chainsaw Sally, 2004. So now we'll go back to the film, The Librarian, that was Jennifer's number 4, and it's our number 1. And this is from 1983, the character of Holloway, played by Jason Robards, in Something Wicked This Way Comes.
I know who you are. You are the autumn people. Where do you come from? The dust. Where do you go to? The grave.
Yes. We are the hungry ones. Your torments call us like dogs in the night. And we do feed. And feed well.
To stuff yourselves on other people's nightmares.
And butter our plain bread with delicious pain. So, you do understand a little.
I'm a sucker for this movie. I love Jason Robards in this movie. I love so much about this movie, and one of the reasons that I liked Evie and also Robards in these two back-to-back films for us is that I love when the librarian is a good guy. I mean, I like when the librarian is a bad guy. I think that that's really very fun, but because I think in a weird way I do sort of see librarians as heroes, and so it's fun in movies, right, to see that. And Jason Robards, he's so good in this movie. And there's a great scene in the library where Mr. Dark is trying to lure him with the offer of giving him his youth back. And, you can just see it in his face, like, I'm not going to budge. I'm not going to budge. Boy, 30 was a great year, but I'm not going to budge. He doesn't even have, he's not even saying anything. You just see, like, because he's got such a hangdog face to begin with. I'm such a fan of this movie, and it's not necessarily even my general sort of, because it's so seeped in nostalgia. Nostalgia is really the entire aesthetic for this film, which usually is not something that I particularly like. But in this movie, I find it sort of magical.
Jonathan Pryce, too, as Mr. Dark.
Love him.
Jonathan Pryce is always great. But yeah, before Jason Robards, because this was Disney, and this was actually the last movie to be released under the Walt Disney Productions banner. After this, it was Walt Disney Pictures. After this, but before they cast Jason Robards, they went to their staple of pre-'80s regulars like Darren McGavin, Dean Jones, even Dick Van Dyke was considered for that role, and then Walter Matthau, Jack Lemmon, James Garner, and Hal Holbrook before they settled on Jason Robards. But I agree, he's great.
Holbrook.
Yeah, I could definitely see Hal Holbrook, but Jason Robards is fantastic, as is Jonathan Pryce. And it's based on that Ray Bradbury story that I guess Disney did a lot of tinkering with after the fact based on test audiences, and it didn't do well at all at the theater. Pretty much flopped.
Actually, what I find very sad about this is that it's not on Disney Plus. And I assumed that it was. I felt like surely this movie is going to be on Disney Plus, and I could go rewatch it right now, and it's not, and I can't. And I was very grumpy to find that out.
Oh, I share your outrage. That is, I think it's so odd that it wasn't a hit. I think it's a really underrated film. And I feel like that also kind of mirrors the character, of Charles Holloway, where he's an underrated character. His own son doesn't think that much of him. And I think he's got heart trouble, and he's not, a risk taker, but he ends up saving the town. He's the good, he personifies the good versus Mr. Dark, personifying the evil. And I agree with you about Jason Robards. Like, he just gives it a gravitas. Mm-hmm. That character where you really believe in him and you want him, and he never, loses his center. He knows who he is, and he then steps up to the moment, in his own quiet way. In the last, showdown that takes place in the library, I'm like, yes. It's so good. It's so good. And yeah, for me, he's like the ultimate liberated librarian character type, where he gets to find his moment and really he knows himself, but he also, like I said, like meets the moment. He's in my Hall of Fame list. I have a Hall of Fame and a Hall of Shame list on my website. So he's in my Hall of Fame. And I love this quote. And I also love this from Ray Bradbury, who was a very noted lifelong fan of libraries and librarians, and rest in peace, Ray Bradbury. And he said, libraries raised me. And so it's just nice that he believed in librarians, and I think that's why he made that character a librarian, which it's a good one to end on, a satisfying.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and Disney held this back for just about a year, doing additional scenes. They added opening narration. They hired James Horner to do a completely new score, trying to retool everything to get a hit, and for whatever reason, they just didn't do it. But it's definitely worth checking out, even if it's not on Disney Plus. Who can we call? I mean, who do we know? We gotta make that happen. But that is our number one, and is Jennifer's number 4. So it's a goodie. Holloway, played by Jason Robards. Something Wicked This Way Comes, from 1983. That is good stuff. Jennifer, you always bring the knowledge. That is fantastic.
Yay! I'm a librarian. That's like the highest praise.
Well, we are going to be back at Gateway Film Center, Columbus, Ohio, back in front of that crowd that we love on Wednesday, September 9th. We're going to be doing it live. We're going to be talking about aging and horror, and we're going to be showing Bubba Hotep. Speaking of Bruce Campbell.
That's right. Very excited to watch this one with a crowd. Very excited. Love that movie.
That is going to be a lot of fun. And Jennifer, as we said, you can find her great website, so much to dig into, at REAL-librarians.com. And where else can we find you? What else you got going on? What else you got planned?
So I write and publish 2 posts a month on the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays of the month, and you can sign up to get email notifications so that you're always in the know about librarians and film.
That is fantastic. Well, we loved having you on the first time. We loved having you on this time. We're going to invite you back to talk about flooring in horror movies. And you're a fantastic guest. And, yeah, check out reallibrarians.com. And we hope to hear from you as well. You can always find us and keep the conversation going. Talk about any of these that you like, any that we missed. I don't think you're going to find any that we missed between Jennifer and Hope, I'll tell you what. But if you have one, let us know. You can find us on Twitter. That's Fright Club Pod. Also on Facebook and Instagram, it's Mad Wolf Columbus. And the main website, you can find all of our written reviews of all the new movies coming out. You can find us at madwolf.com. So, yes?
What did you forget, George?
I forgot that we have a Fright Club Podcast Facebook group, and we would love to have you. Thank you. Cannot believe that. There should be a bell to ring or something. But, yeah, Fright Club Podcast Facebook group. Just send a request, and we will grant it post-haste and get you in on the conversation. So that is fun. All right, so until next time, she is Hope Madden.
He's George Wolf.
And she is Jennifer Snook Brown, who's going to catalog us and put us away.
Stay frightful, my friends.
Yay! Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all so much. This was so much fun.
Awesome.
I really appreciate it.